right. So I think that we will get started again. I am going to give an introduction to our next speaker. So we're going to move on now to Nadia Mori. So Nadia earned her Master of Science at the University of Saskatchewan. She's been a forage extension specialist for over 10 years, working with both the Saskatchewan and BC provincial government. More recently, though, Nadia has taken on the coordinator role with the Peace River Forage Association of BC and the extension coordination for the Peace Region Living Lab, which is a 5-year producer-led research project. She is also a trained actor and, among other credits, has produced several audiobooks and 2 podcast series. When Nadia wears a farmer hat, she produces microgreens and fresh vegetables at Squiggly Things to bring local and nutritious food to northern communities. So I'm just going to share her presentation over. I think if I go like that. Okay. Perfect. And I'm going to turn it over to Nadia.
Thank you so much. I have an interesting task in that I know there's some people in the room who know the Living Lab very intimately, and probably some people who have never really encountered it. Maybe just if you want to let me know if you've never heard about the Peace Region Living Lab. Excellent. As you should, because your general manager is very intimately involved in the Peace Region Living Lab. So, but I hope I still have something new to share with you here today. So on my title slide here, you see a picture that was taken at our kickoff event, which was on August 11th last year in Fairview. So there we had a bunch of our science collaborators, our partner groups, and also some of our core producers who joined us that day. So we have 8 partner groups and 1 Indigenous partner that are part of the Peace Region Living Lab. It's quite a diverse mix of folks and groups coming together, which makes for interesting times sometimes, but also is a tremendous opportunity to connect across our various groups that are all kind of doing similar things and working towards similar goals. Now, I just want to back up and start, like, what is a living lab? And the living labs that I'm going to be talking about, they're part of the Agricultural Climate Solution Programming offered through Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And it's not something new that Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada came up with. The model of a living lab was actually developed in other sectors like healthcare, where, for example, they noticed that people in the field doing the practice were starting to innovate and doing things differently. And then somebody noticed and was like, hey, I see you developed a better way of doing things. Like, could you share and maybe we can adopt the same thing? So that's kind of how the idea of a living lab got started. We're not the only living lab. And if you hear people talk about, oh yeah, I'm part of the living lab, it's good to ask them and specify, well, which one of the 13 living labs that we have across Canada? So we have in BC alone, we have 2. So we have the BC Living Lab, and then us, the Peace Region Living Lab. And then in Alberta, it's even more fun because there's 3. We have the Alberta Beef Producers leading a living lab, and then also Regenerative Alberta Living Lab as well. We are quite special though, because we're the only one that's cross-provincial. So we're the only one that is not just limited to a provincial boundary, because we are aligned to a watershed boundary, which makes so much more sense, because if you would take away that pesky little line on the map, we have similar geographical ecoregions, the access to markets, similar challenges in our crop growing, all those things. Another reason why probably the Peace Region was selected to be one of the living labs is that we have a very high potential in our soils for carbon sequestration. Now, some people feel really excited about that, and some people maybe not so much, but it is something that's there, and it's something that's good to know. So overall, the Agriculture Climate Solution Living Labs is a way to bring together farmers, ranchers, researchers, partner groups like the Peace Region Forage Seed Association, and work together on solutions for climate change challenges through beneficial management practices, often just referred to as BMPs. And this is key, that it's not like a traditional research project, it's an innovation project supported by research. So that goes along with that first point here, that it's user-centered. And like I mentioned before, like other living labs were, for example, in healthcare, somebody had an innovation and then other people were curious about it. Same for you. Maybe you are somebody who is curious about things and you just like to innovate or do something different or try something out that has never been done before. And then maybe it works and your neighbor's kind of curious and is like, what did you do to make it work so well? And then you have an opportunity to share that. So that's that same idea of having the user at the center of it, the producer, the farmer, the rancher on the ground, which always makes for an interesting discussion when we talk with scientists, because as you can imagine, as a scientist, you're going to have replication 1, 2, 3, and 4, and it's all going to be the same. It's all going to be on the same soil. We're going to do the same practice everywhere. Now, if you're trying to translate that to a farm level, all of a sudden you're dealing with the weather happened, staffing challenges happened, equipment failure happened. I needed to change my whole crop rotation because something else came up, or I added more land, or I now have less land. So there's so many things that can happen, and it's interesting to observe that when scientists are trying to wrap their heads around around the living lab and working at a field scale. And that's also the partnership point. We have all those partnerships, you as the producer, the partner groups, the scientists, and then the real life context. This is different than doing small plot research, which is also critically important. But now we want to see, okay, so if we put it to the real life test, where is it going to fall apart, or how is it working? How does it need to be tweaked? When you're scaling something, there's often a lot of discoveries about things that need to be adapted. So for the Peace Region Living Lab, the title of it actually is Enhancing Agroecosystem Services in the Peace Region. And that's just a big mouthful trying to explain the many different facets that are part of the Living Lab. If we look a little bit more deeper, it's trying to look at ways to increase productivity, profitability, environmental resilience, and also, seeing, can we generate more ecosystem services from the practices that you're doing? And then, of course, because it is an Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada program, there is also the program goal of increasing carbon sequestration and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And that can come in many different forms. So again, overall, it's working with these beneficial management practices to create positive spin-offs on your land and in your operation. And it's also about resiliency, right? And we hear that word a lot, resiliency, but it's a very real thing, because we are experiencing some pretty extremes, whether it's in the weather, it's in the markets, it's in the economy. I think the last couple years were a good example of a lot of crazy extremes that were thrown at you to deal with. So overall, we have 57 producers working with the Living Lab, and from the Peace Region Forage Seed Associations, there's 8 project sites, so 8 producers that are directly working with the Peace Region Living Lab. And then in total, we have 13 of those beneficial management practices. I'll dive into them a little bit more later. And they all came from the producers. So those were we talked to the producers before the Living Lab got started, and we're asking, what would you like to see and investigate, or what are you working on, and are curious to know the numbers for that. And it's a 5-year project. On paper, it started May of last year, although until we actually hit the ground, it was certainly quite a bit later than that. And it's quite shocking that we're already approaching the end of year one. So it's been quite a ride. So this is a map representation of how our sites and partner groups are distributed across the Peace region. You can see that band of prairie, and we really are a northern frontier. I mean, we still have land that's being accessed for the first time. So we're quite unique in that. And here's our fearless leaders. Amongst them Talon, and I really want to extend a big thank you to and commend the Peace Region Forage Seed Association for having taken a lead, because your group is actually the main lead of this project and holds the contract with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and then the other partner groups are working with your organization. So you are very instrumental in making this a success. Then we have Akim Omokanye. He's our science director. So he makes sure that everything goes as much as possible according to science principles, and helps us keep on track in that regard. We have Monica Benoit. She's our socioeconomics lead. So she looks at aspects of how do the economics pan out? Because, you know, if that's not aligned up, then nobody's going to want to implement the practice. We have Lisa Jeffrey. She's our budget lady. She keeps us on track in terms of how much spending we can still do, which is really important in a big project like this. And then myself, I take care of the knowledge and extension activities. So events, webinars, workshops, videos, all that fun stuff. I feel like I have the most fun job of all of us five. So next up, sometimes they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and maybe a video is worth 1,000 pictures. So we made a little video to give you a bit of an introduction to the Living Lab, and maybe keep out, watch if you recognize any of the fields or any of the producers in the video. This was all shot in the Peace region on the Alberta and BC side. You maybe saw Dr. Bharat Shrestha. He's here in the room as well. He's one of our agriculture and agri-food science partners in this Living Lab. So if you have some follow-up questions too, he could answer them as well. And if you like the video, if you'd like to see it again or share it with somebody, you can go to our website. We have it right there under podcasts and videos. And while you're there, there's a big fat button at the top to subscribe to our newsletter if you want to stay informed about events and workshops and other fun things that are going to be coming up. So I just wanted to share a little bit more about these beneficial management practices. What exactly are they that we're looking at, and you know, what could be in there for you also to learn from? So like I mentioned, they were all kind of guided by the producer in terms of what you as a farmer, rancher, producer would like to look at. And they're extremely diverse. So anything from perennial forages and annual crop rotation. So that could be something, or I think would be relevant to your specific group in terms of incorporating some of those perennials into an annual crop rotation. Cover cropping, both in a livestock context and also annual crop context, intercropping, companion cropping, seeding green manure to reduce other synthetic fertilizer inputs, using biological amendments, doing forage rejuvenation, which again, with my hat as the Peace River Forage Association coordinator, is certainly the #1 question I always get. How could I rejuvenate my forage, especially without completely breaking and reseeding? Extending the grazing season, which can come in the form of bale grazing, swath grazing, stockpile grazing, that sort of thing. Integrating livestock into annual cropping systems, which is, you know, always an interesting discussion to be had, but it is happening. And again, people are finding ways to collaborate with each other and try those practices out. Adaptive grazing management, so just meaning in terms of, say, multi-paddock, adaptive grazing, short rotation, high density short rotation, that sort of thing, where we really shorten the graze period to avoid that second bite of the grass. And then finally, also nutrient cycling and a closed loop organic farm. That's at our Indigenous site. And just like a little fun fact there, the soil that you see, that's at one of the producer sites that I'm working with. On the left-hand side is where bale grazing happened, and on the right side is the control that was hasn't seen any bale grazing yet. So pretty cool difference right there. No-till systems, again, both in an annual cropping context and market gardening. So we also have some horticultural producers that are participating, increasing plant diversity. That can be through diversified crop rotations and urease inhibitors to reduce supplied nitrogen rates. Again, sort of that greenhouse gas emission reduction goal. Now, what's in it for you? You know, maybe there are some of you in the room who are directly working with us, but what if you're not and you're curious about this, or you would like to have a piece of this and learn something from it? We will have summer tours that are being put on by all of our partner groups. So you will have summer tours, Peace River Forage Association, Peace Country Beef and Forage, SARDA, and PARA. So there will be lots of opportunities for you to go out and observe on your peers' land and hear from your peers to see like what they found on the ground. We'll have winter seminars. We just had one in Rycroft called Below Ground, Soil Health and Wealth. And if you were there, hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you missed it, we'll have another one next winter. We'll also have opportunities for producer workshops and training events. There will be knowledge videos where we can share, you know, because maybe you can't always travel to Fort Vermilion and see what folks are doing up there. But if we can maybe bring that knowledge to you in a video format and you can watch it at 2 in the morning when you can't sleep. Well, we already have podcasts up on our website. So if you go there, you'll find podcasts already up there. Winter webinars. We just had a drought recovery series offered by Peace Country Beef and Forage, and we'll have a pest monitoring webinar come up offered by the Peace Region Forage Seed Association later this month. So make sure you tune in on that. And then later on, as we get more data, we'll have fact sheets, reports, all that fun stuff where you can dive into the numbers and the nitty-gritty. And then beyond the Living Lab and you know, through this Living Lab, we really hope it's not just a 5-year kind of flash in the pan and then it's gone. We hope that it can be also the building block of an agricultural network that remains beyond the time that the Peace Region Living Lab was active, to keep that connection going between our groups. Now, another way that we would tremendously appreciate your support is that we are currently doing a survey, and you have in the middle of each table, there's a couple of copies of the survey. I know people hear the word survey and they're like, oh, another one of those, but it's really important for us to get an idea of the baseline. You know, where are people at? Like, are people doing certain practices? And maybe they would like to, but there's reasons why it's not happening. You know, maybe you've gone to a seminar and you heard about something, or you saw your neighbor do something and you're like, man, that would be great, but I just can't do it on my place because of X, Y, and Z. So those are kind of the things we would love to hear from you. And it, you know, should maybe take a little bit more than 5 minutes to fill that out. If you missed the survey today, there's ample opportunity to catch it online. We have it right on our website. There's a section that says surveys and reports, and you can click there and it'll take you to the online. You can quickly do it on your phone. That works too. And then we'll do another one in I guess 4 years time when we come to the last year to see if anything has changed, if there's any other any shift in terms of how much people are doing these practices. And with that, I think those were the main points I had for you today, but hopefully there's some questions in the room, maybe some things that sparked your interest as I was talking, or some things that you were already curious about before about the Living Lab.
You did such a, oh, right here. Well, not to muddy the water a bit, but I think we have a challenge as farmers to realize there's a huge shift to whether we disagree or not with the science. It's going that way, and what do we do? I'm always one, it bothers me when we can't have conversation, and I'm not saying this is the place, but recently I saw data that in the economic slowdown in 08 and then also with COVID, CO2 levels did not dip at all, even though the world economy shut down. And I think my personal thing is there's cycles in the history of the world, and we're just in one. But the reality is, it seems like we kind of have to do our thing here. But I think you need to know that a lot of farmers struggle, because if we really do feel there's a bit of an agenda going on, it's frustrating. I don't know if you want to comment on that or what, but I think it's an elephant in the room thing.
I appreciate you bringing that up. So I remember at our kickoff event, we had somebody saying like, yeah, they really took issue with that, and they did not really trust that science. I think, and I hear you on that. I feel like it's standing with one leg on the one side and with the other leg on the other side of that divide. But I hope as a producer, you could, even if you feel a bit irked about that agenda, that you could see that the goal is still to give you benefit as the producer, right? Like, it's still beneficial to have an increased organic matter in your soil content, more water holding capacity, just better rooting capacity for your plants. So that's what I always try to keep in mind, that, what's in it for the producer? If they're not on the carbon train, what is in there? How can we still make this valuable? But I would say let's keep having that discussion, because it will keep coming. It'll keep coming up.
Than all of man does in 1 year. So there you go. And so we can chip away at 10% or whatever, and all of a sudden there's a volcano, and there you go. But anyway, no, good comment. I'm all for organic matter, and you're right. We have to think about, I call it the middle ground, trying to not to overreact either way, right? So as farmers, we have decisions to make, and we know that we love our soil, and what can we do to take care of it? And I think we all can agree with that. So
Thank you.
Not a good comment. When we started this about 2 years ago, actually, I think Tal and I have been involved with, call it the politics of it, in 5 years ago. I think the same as you. I hate carbon. I hate carbon tax. I hate the agenda. I can hate the government. I'm allowed to do that. But the reality is that I don't think you mentioned the amount of money that's coming in the peace country out of this. It started at $10 million. We're at 6.5. And if the Peace Region Forest Seed Association would have not have taken the lead in this, we'd have nothing. It'd be left alone. So how do you give it to, I get a lot of growers that say, well, what about this carbon thing? Why do you support it? Well, first of all, I'm supporting 6.5. Our association is going to be one of the 7 or 9. That's going to get a fair chunk of it. And if you're from Alberta, I'm not sure if you're from Alberta or British Columbia. Alberta had a carbon credit program for X amount of years. I got nothing because I'm a forage sheep producer. If I'm a cowboy, you get nothing. Well, who's storing the most carbon? The guy that's doing wheat, snow, or the guy with the cows, or the forage sheep producers? So now we were looking at carbon credits, and part of our association is going to be doing, how many holes are we punching at 3 meters deep, not 6 inches? 1 meter deep, 1 meter. We worked on it. Like 6 inches doesn't make sense when you're forage seed. So we really pumped at it to go 1 meter deep, and let's do it right, because there's no way that it's measured properly to do the carbon. So the end goal is to give carbon credits, is what it is. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, Alan. I mean, and I don't want to mention this ahead of time, but the members are going to see it in our finances are going to say, there's going to see high numbers, but don't forget we were taking the lead for the rest of the Peace Country. So out of that, but I totally agree with you. I just hate the BS of it. And I wish it wasn't here. I don't think it's going to change our CO2 levels. I'll be honest with you, but it's going to change our organic matter. And as soon as you have that, you're going to get increased yields again. And it's science that we just wouldn't get. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's 100%. That's why we did it, was the whole idea that we were actually going to be able to get some data on our crops, our region. And so that was my main goal, was that I don't want the data to be coming from somewhere else. And what other opportunity are we going to have, especially as a forage seed industry that is a niche industry in, you know, in the country? Where else who's going to do that data if we don't step up and make sure that it gets done? So that was what we were hoping. Oh, I see that on that you showed with bale grazing. Sorry. Oh, no, that's okay. We're just looking at the questions here. I don't know why it won't. There we go. On the 2 soil samples that you showed with bale grazing, was that tilled after grazing, then regrown? Do you know that?
I don't, because I'll
We-
be meeting with them to collect the soil history.
So we don't know that at this moment, Merlin, because we are following up with and having meetings now with all of it was a really late start, and we basically hit the ground running to try and get as much done in the growing season as possible. And so we are meeting with all of our core producers and getting history, 5-year history, farm management data on all of the sites that we have. So we'll be able to better answer that as we go forward.
I think maybe it's also important to mention that you saw like our management team, and then also Talon with your group. What's really great is that we also have a way to kind of control maybe some of the data, because you're sharing a lot of for a producer to come on and share data over 5 years with us as a project. That's very trusting, right? And you want to kind of know that that data is secure and we don't just blasting it all over the place. So first of all, it's all anonymized. And then we are also kind of the barrier before it goes to Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. And we have a lot of discussions around that. So, you know, it is what it is. There's certainly politics. I'm not denying that. But again, I really hope we can, like Talon said, it's a tremendous opportunity for the forage seed, also for forage association. Like we're a small association that without that kind of project money, we wouldn't be able to do this kind of amazing research.
It's working. There we go. Any other questions for Nadia? Awesome. Well, I really appreciate Nadia taking the time to come and explain this huge project. And as Danny said, you're going to see it. It's going to end up on our books now. And Brat wanted to make a comment.
Just want to make a comment on that carbon emission thing. Yeah, it is true that we cannot sequester all of them, but as that map shows, Peace region has that big potential to put carbon into the soil through better management practices. I'm not going to talk about that politics or thing, but I'm as a study lead for soil health and fertility development in the Beaver Lodge Research Farm. I had a great opportunity on my first day to talk with Robin in Edmonton conference. He said, we just harness the solar energy and put into the soil. That's how we build the soil. That impressed me, how great things are happening in Peace region and how we can build the soil and soil health, and it will be beneficial from multiple perspective, including revenue enhancement and also crop productivity. We hope it will be the great opportunity. And that all the scientific studies also shows that northern agriculture will be much more benefited in the future. Thank you.
Great. If everybody could give a round of applause to Nadia, and thank you.
Joanne raised her hand. Sorry, Joanne, I wasn't here.
Thanks a lot. Nadia, you did an incredible presentation, and I know that there's a small number of forage seed producers in the Peace region there that are participating, but you have the moral support of a lot of the forage seed growers in Saskatchewan. And it would have been absolutely fantastic to have been part of this, because we are north as well and share much of the same soil challenges and ecosystem. But what I do want to say is absolutely congratulations. You guys are forging a whole new area for us. And I agree with all the producer comments about carbon, but I guess it's going to end up being probably a bigger story than just carbon. And for your individual farms, as soil scientist Henry Jansen said yesterday at the Canadian Agriculture Sustainability Conference, organic matter comes from roots, not shoots. What a better system to be studying than forage seed production. So thank you very much from Saskatchewan, and hopefully we'll be able to spread the word in Saskatchewan about the evidence that's being collected from this project. It'll benefit a lot of the people that are growing crops in the Northeast regions. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Joanne.